Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? I got a new one for you today. All right, this is a really important topic that I think we all could get better at. Okay, so this one is moving from a false power to an authentic, true power. Okay, so we all want to get a better sense of our own power in the world and how to use it. And so I'm going to talk about how we could do that, give some stories and some tips. Okay, all right, here we go. This is hot off the press. I just made it today. Okay. You can only get it big. Aha, there we go. All right. So from false power to authentic power. That's the title. Okay. So it gets more positive as we go along. All right. So let's do a couple of definitions first, right? Because if we're going to talk about power, we might as well know what the heck we're talking about. All right. So power, right? Definition of power: the ability or capacity to control, influence, or act in a particular way by a conscious choice, right? So power and choice often go hand in hand, right? So it's deliberately choosing to do something that comes from my center, from my authentic power, all right? We're going to talk more later about what authentic power actually is, okay? On the other hand, powerlessness. And so we all have some areas in our life where we are powerless, right? So powerlessness is a lack of ability or capacity to control, influence, or have power in some area of your life, right? So there's some things we can control, and there's some things that we can't control, right? Unfortunately, sometimes we mix these things up, right? Sometimes we think we have power where we don't, or we think we don't have power where we actually could have power, all right? So it's important for us to identify where these mix-ups are and to unmix them up so we're more clear, okay? So for example, right? So here's a diagram I found on the internet, okay? So they're using the word control, but basically we're talking here about power, right? So let's say there's things here that are in my control. So for example, I have a choice about the kinds of things that I say, some of the actions that I take, the opinions that I choose to hold on to, right? Some boundaries that I'm exercising in my life. So those are actually things I have choice and power about. But if I think I don't have power, I may not do anything about them. I might feel like I'm a victim of these things. Like I might just blurt things out and feel like, oh, I can't even control it, right? Or I might invite negative people in my life, toxic people, and feel like there's nothing I can do about it, right? So I might think I don't have power, or I actually do have some power. So that's a mix up. So on the outside of the circle are parts that are out of my control, right? So for example, I can't control what other people say and do. I can't control what they think. I can't control what they think about me, right? I might be able to influence some of those things to a degree, but I really don't have power over those things. But if I think I do and I try to force other people to be who I want them to be, it's just going to create suffering in my life, right? Or if I feel like I should have control over certain things, such as like traffic or weather, but I don't have control or power over them, I'm going to suffer, right? I'm going to be banging my head against the wall and being like, man, what the heck, right? I'm going to be upset all the time, okay? So that's another power mix-up. Okay, so from power mix-ups, develop false power stories, right? So these are stories that we made up ourselves, or maybe we heard them from other people in our lives, or heard them from the media somewhere, or in a self-help book, or from an institution such as a religious institution or school, or somewhere in our life, right? We've picked up on these false power stories, and we decided to buy into them, okay? And I almost think of them like an infomercial, right? Because they're not authentic power stories. They're kind of like substitutes for real power, okay? So it's kind of like the guy on the left, like, hey, buy this amazing product, or wait, there's more, right? If you engage in this formula of power and buy into this false power story, you'll finally feel like you're enough. Woo, that's great, right? Or you won't have to change. You could still do what you're doing and feel better without having to change anything. Isn't that great, right? Or you won't have to do any hard work around yourself. You'll just magically feel better. Oh, wow. Okay. Or you get to control things that maybe you're not supposed to control. All right. But the thing is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, right? Because these false power stories are not sustainable. Okay. Okay. But what makes us vulnerable to believing false power stories? And by the way, I will get into plenty of examples, but so it starts out with a vulnerability. Just like if we were to watch an infomercial and buy the product, it might be at a vulnerable time of the day. Like they usually show them in the middle of the night when we're kind of tired, you know, our defenses are down, and all of a sudden buying a Ginsu knife seems like a great idea, right? So we're a little vulnerable too when we buy into these false power stories, okay? So if we're suffering from low self-esteem, we might buy into a false power story about how we can get to esteem, right? If we're struggling with uncertainty or even struggling with abandonment, we might buy into a false power story, right? Because false power stories might give us a sense of certainty, a false sense of certainty, when in fact there is a lot of uncertainty. So we might be like, oh, great. I feel so much more certain right now. That makes me feel more powerful, okay? Desire for a quick fix, right? So in real life, things are complex, right? Sometimes it takes a lot of hard work to make things better. But a false power story make us feel like all you got to do is A, B, and C, and it'll be magically better, right? So it's like, oh, let me buy into that easy route, right? It makes us vulnerable when we feel like we have to be in control. So tied into that, you know, fear of uncertainty. Believing someone else's version of reality. So if there's a more powerful person in your life or someone you perceive to be more powerful, you might buy into their reality instead of listening to your gut or listening to your intuition about what's real, okay? If you're too focused on external trappings of success or power, you might be vulnerable to one too. Like, all I need to do to be powerful is to make a lot of money or be a little bit famous, right? Or get a really cool car, right? So sometimes if we buy into that or those kind of superficial things, we're in a false power story, okay? Because authentic power comes from within, okay? And also, if our reality is too hard to face, we might buy into a false power story that takes us further away from the reality, or at least part of that reality. Okay, so these are just things to be aware of, right? Things that we might be vulnerable of that can set us up for buying into a power story. Okay, false power story, rather. Okay, but here's the problem. They're not sustainable, okay? Imagine almost like every time you buy into the false power story, right, or get this extra charge of power, it's like recharging your battery. And all of a sudden you feel great. Like, yeah, I'm good for a while. But inevitably, it kind of wears off. And you got to find a new place to charge your battery, right? How else am I going to grab power from somebody else? Or what else can I tell myself to make my power come back, right? It's kind of like it ebbs and flows. You feel good for a while and then it fades and you got to keep renewing it, okay? But it's almost like this anxiety about renewing this power story because you're afraid that when it fades and the battery runs out, you have to deal with a harsh reality, okay? And ultimately, it leads you back to powerlessness because it's just like covering over your powerlessness with false power, but beneath the, you know, the false power story is powerlessness. So part of it is you have to learn how to accept where you're powerless. Okay, so here's a bunch of examples of false power stories. So you might be able to relate to at least some of these, okay, but I'm just going to throw a bunch out there. Okay, so if you're a bit of a perfectionist, okay, your false power story might go something like this. So if I can do things perfectly, I'll finally be good enough and I won't be judged or abandoned because nobody would leave somebody that's perfect, right? So it's kind of a false because there's no such thing as perfection. And you might kind of be soothed for a little while. Like let's say my perfectionism is on my academic performance. So let's say I get an A or an A plus on an exam or a report card. And now I feel powerful. Wow, I did great. I'm almost perfect here. But then the next semester comes and I got to start all over again. You know, I'm not only good enough until the next test and the next grade, because once that grade passes, I got to prove myself again and again and again to be good enough. Okay. Or it could even be with a skill, right? Let's say I win a tennis match. I feel great. I feel powerful, but now it fades because I have to prove myself again in the next tennis match, right? So it's a constant need to recharge that perfectionist battery. And deep beneath is that fear of not being good enough and lack of acceptance of yourself. Okay, so related to that is what they call a just world, you know, philosophy or hypothesis. And some of us, or a lot of us, buy into this sometimes. So basically the just world false power story goes like this. So good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. So I can gain power and control my destiny by being good, right? So it's giving you a sense of power where maybe you don't have power. Because as hard as you try, you can only control what you put into things. You can't control the outcome. You're never going to have full control over the world by trying to be good. First of all, you can't be good all the time. But even bad people experience good things sometimes, and good people experience, challenging and negative things sometimes. So it's not about, A equals B. It's not that simple, right? So this is missing the complexities of life, and you're inevitably going to go back to powerlessness. Okay, here's another one. Magical thinker power story, right? So this is related to like positive psychology and some of that stuff and affirmations, and all I have to do is think positive and I'll be positive, right? I'll tell myself I'm smart and I'll be smart. I'll think and grow rich. I'll tell myself I'm rich and I'll be rich, right? But it's missing the fact that life is much more complicated than that. You can't always just think positive and magically everything's good, okay? It's sort of like you're unrealistically positive. It's good to be positive, but you have to see the reality too, okay? Because positive things can happen. Positive thinking does help, but it's not just like it's so simple just to think positive and magically things will get good, right? All right. Here's another one, the opposite end of the spectrum. So this is the pessimist false power story, okay? So this one kind of goes something like this. Well, life sucks, people suck, everything's going to turn out bad. What's the point? Nothing good happens to me anyway, right? There's a little bit of a victim in there too. But what you're doing is you're having a hard time dealing with uncertainty. So you're trying to create certainty by making everything negative. Because if it's just going to be negative, at least I know how to deal with that. But if I open it up to it could be positive, I could be disappointed and get my hopes up. I can't handle that, right? So let's just make everything negative and that'll be simple, okay? So I'm trying to get power by doing that. And on the other hand, we have to remember that life can be difficult and challenging, right? So there's some truth to the negativity, but good things also happen every day, right? So dark happens, but light happens too. We have to make room for both, okay? Just like the magical thinker has to make room for the negative, the pessimist has to make room for the positive, okay? All right, so here's another one. I see this kind of a lot, and I sometimes go through this myself, right? Let's say something happens that disturbs us. We start obsessing about it, right? We think about it, we try to solve it in our mind, we try to go back in time in our mind and redo it. We try to think of what I could have said, what I could have did, right? Or I try to think ahead and plan and plan and plan, right? As if I have control over the future. So here's the story. So I gain power when I assess about things because it gives me the illusion of control over the past or future. Makes me feel that unsolvable things can be solved or fixed. And ruminating is easier than facing more painful realities, right? So as much as you hate your obsessing, as annoying as it can be, it makes life simple. It's easy just to think, than to allow yourself to feel and deal with the complexities of life, right? So again, we're dealing with a part rather than the whole. You see the theme from a lot of these things, right? So, but you really only get true power by seeing the whole and being accepting of the whole. So all these are false because it's narrowing it down, all right? So ruminating creates suffering and prevents me from fully experiencing reality. Okay, so this one is for the addict or people who engage in target behaviors. So this could include self-injury, eating disorders, that kind of thing, all right? So if you're in that mode and you've experienced that, this is your false power story. So I can't handle living life on life's terms. I gain power when I control the emotional intensity of life by escaping the moment through addictive substances and target behaviors. Okay, so the reason why addiction has fuel is because you're trying to alter your experience of life and trying to narrow it down to what you think you could handle instead of allowing the full range of life experiences and emotions. Okay, so in essence, if you think about it, in 12-step programs, power is like the huge theme, okay? Because you feel like you could control it, but you really can't control it. You're trying to get power through your addiction, but in essence, you lose a lot of power. And you can't stop it on your own power. You need a power greater than yourself, such as a 12-step community and your higher power, right? So in the attempt to gain control, you're out of control. which is kind of the paradox of addiction or target behaviors. So you try to avoid darkness by engaging in an addiction, but in the process, you put yourself in the darkest places possible, right? So you end up experiencing what you avoid anyway, and much worse. So it kind of backfires on you when you engage in this false power story and strategy. Okay, shadow victim, okay? For more about the victim, you could check out my video about the victim too, but in essence, there's multiple power stories with the shadow victim, okay? So one has to do with life being fair or unfair, right? So this is a little related to that just world hypothesis that we're talking about. So basically this goes, this thing, whatever that is, shouldn't have happened to me because it wasn't fair. You know, basically me, I'm a good person, I didn't deserve to get that. You know, I don't deserve this, right? And, you know, your behavior was wrong because you did this to me and I'm in the right, okay? So it's very based on my version of fair and unfair. The next shadow story, shadow victim story, justice, vengeance, and entitlement are the main themes. So basically this goes, well, you know, now that you did this to me or this happened to me, I need to right the wrongs that were done to me, right? I need to sue, or I need to get exact revenge in some way, you know, or I need to get you to pay up for what you did. You need to repent for what you did, or whatever my version is of what you're supposed to do to make it up to me, right? So you in the world owe me because I went through this harrowing experience, okay? But the problem is I'm never gonna feel like it's enough. Even if I get the apology, which I may not ever get, it's still not gonna be satisfying to me, okay? And so I'm gonna keep staying in this victim mode. Or if it's satisfying in this one situation, I'm just gonna find another situation where I feel like a victim and use that as my identity and have the same pattern of, you know, needing justice, okay? All right, so next story, escaping responsibility, okay? So because I suffered from blah, 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 or this thing was done to me that really wasn't fair, I shouldn't have to function in my life in a certain way or change my behavior, right? So, you know, let's say I'm a victim of trauma. You know, I suffered a lot and I shouldn't have to, you know, function at work because I'm going through really hard times with my flashbacks and everything. And I shouldn't be expected to have to work a full day and do the same quality of work as everybody else, you know. Or, you know, I gained a lot of weight because of all the stress that I'm under and all the problems that I've had and the mental illness that I have. And I you know, I eat because of that, and I shouldn't have to work on myself because, you know, that was done to me. The fact that I'm suffering was done to me. So, you know, they owe me, right? So it's kind of excusing me from doing what I need to do right now to fix my life because I'm so fixed on what they did to me, okay? But that's going to keep us stuck inevitably. It's going to prevent us from moving on. Okay, controlling the future is the next theme. So I'm going to have to, you know, prevent this from happening again because I was so hurt by this victim experience, right? So I got to try to rearrange my life to try to make sure I'm never going to be victimized again. But what's the problem here? I can't possibly prevent that. I could try, but you can't control all the factors in life that would prevent you from being hurt again, okay? So that's the scoop. All right, so next one. So this one's related to the anxious ambivalent attachment style. Okay, if you want to learn a whole lot about this, I have a video about that. Okay, but basically the archetypes that fall under this, okay, or the patterns that fall under this are people like codependent empaths, right, who kind of feel other people's feelings. Okay, shadow givers, so people who give all the time, right, and don't receive enough. Blood donors, so to speak, and those shadow dance with vampires. Prostitutes, not literal prostitutes, but people who kind of like, hey, I'll just do anything and sacrifice myself if you just meet my needs, okay? Rescuers, so people who go around rescuing people that really should help themselves. And scapegoatees, like the people who take on, you know, the blame that other people are putting on them. You know, when people are scapegoating you, you just take on the scapegoat role, okay? So all these things kind of fit under here. But this is the general story. So I gain power, value, and security through feeling everyone's feelings for them and anticipating and meeting their wants and needs and rescuing them from their problems and giving far more than I receive. I'm even willing to go against my values and self-respect and sacrifice my self-respect in the process. And doing these things ensures that they'll like me and avoid abandoning me. How many of you out there relate to this, right? Okay, so it's like, I'll sell my soul and do anything just to get you to love me, right? It's a really like boundaryless one down position if you're dealing with the relationship grid, another video I have, okay? So when you're boundaryless and one down, you're just gonna sell your soul to be loved, okay? And it's a terrible way to be, because ultimately you're gonna be resentful because you're not really gonna get the love you're desiring, okay? And you're gonna feel like you're bled out. you're the blood donor. You're gonna be in great emotional debt with that person. You're gonna give so much, you're gonna be dried out, okay? So this is not sustainable. You know, it might be a temporary fix, but it's not the best way to get loved, okay? So what about anxious avoidant attachment, okay? So if you're looking at a pursuer-distancer relationship, this is like the distancers, okay? The people who are less in contact with their emotions, who are less connected, okay? So this power story goes something like this. So I get power from being independent, from staying in a reasonable mind, for those who are familiar with DBT, right? Very intellectualized, and cutting myself off from emotions and connections, right? When I feel engulfed by others, I get power by disconnecting, stonewalling, running away, and giving the silent treatment, okay? So I'm powerful because I'm not letting emotions get to me. I'm not allowing myself to be dependent on anybody. I'm not letting myself to need and have needs, okay? So being free from all that, or trying to be, pretending to be, gives me a false sense of power, okay? But the problem is, again, you're dealing with a part and not the whole, because you're cutting off the emotional part of your human experience, and you're depriving yourself of true love and connection, and ultimately your life force, which is very connected to your emotions, okay? So not very sustainable. Okay, the vampire or narcissist false power story. Now this is a really pathological archetype, okay, as you might know, okay? So the vampire or narcissist says, I can't find any true value in myself, so I need to steal value and quote unquote suck blood from other people to survive. So I'll knock people off their centers and seduce them into willingly giving me what I need. And if they don't, I'll shame or bully them into it, okay? So this is really cut off from your own true worth, your own soul esteem, your self-esteem, and you're trying to fill your batteries and steal it from others. So you can need blood donors wherever you can get them to constantly fill you up, constantly make you feel good, you know, to give you admiration, to give you, you know, praise, to give you whatever it is that you're needing because you can't provide it to yourself. So there's a sadness underneath the behavior, but the behavior itself could become very toxic, okay? So that's the problem, because you never really create an authentic relationship. You'll create toxic relationships. And no matter how much you get from people, it never feels like enough. It's never really gonna fill the emptiness in your soul, okay? Okay, so false, related to the narcissist, right? So this is like the bully, the blamer, the scapegoater, that kind of a thing, okay? So this is like boundaryless and one up, okay? So I get power by controlling and emasculating people through violence, threats, force, and intimidation. I'm threatened by the success and goodness of other people, and power is pushing people down, stripping them of power, and getting what I want. And if you try to stand up for me, I'll just knock you down again, okay? So I'm basically stealing power from you in order to be okay, right? And if you have any qualities that make me feel threatened, I'm just gonna forcefully squash them, okay? So if there's good in you, but I don't see good in myself, I'm gonna squash the good in you. If there's vulnerability in you, and I can't deal with the vulnerability in myself, I'm just gonna squash your vulnerability and beat it out of you, okay? So that's the bully, okay? So the problem is, if you keep hating, like this is a projection, by the way. So if you keep hating all the qualities in other people that you can't integrate in yourself, you're never gonna be a whole person, all right? So again, the part and the whole, right? Okay, so, all right, so that was a lot of examples. I hope that clarifies some stuff for you. So how do we find authentic power? How do we get to the real thing? Okay, we made it. Here we go. So some general tips about getting to power. Okay, we have to get more clear and accurate about where we have true power and where we're powerless, right? So we're not involved in these mix-ups and these false power stories. And we have to let go of about these false power stories and these fantasies about what power is. Okay, sometimes we buy into them too much, but as you can see in all those examples, it's not sustainable and it's just going to create more stress and suffering. Okay, so your false power stories are just stories; they're not the reality. They're just a story you heard from somewhere or made up yourself that gives you a false sense of power. So you just got to see it for what it is. Okay, we have to accept areas of our life where we are powerless, right, and not trick ourselves into thinking we have power. Right? Because everybody has areas of powerlessness. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you realistic, okay? And if you are powerless, you could turn over those areas of powerlessness to a higher power, okay, like they do in 12 steps, or to somebody that might have more power than you, okay? So, let's say I have something really heavy to lift and I can't lift it, right? It's not in my power to lift that heavy object. But maybe a physically stronger person can do it for me. So I should ask for help, right? It's not within my power to do it. So I ask somebody that does have more power to do it. Okay, sometimes that's part of the solution. Okay, so screenshot this one, super important. Okay, so what are signs of authentic power? How do I know I actually am in authentic power? Okay, number one, I'm dealing with the truth. Okay, I'm not dealing with a story or a lie, right? I have to open my eyes and clearly see all the elements of this situation, the parts that I want to see and the parts I don't really want to see. Okay, I have to face it, even if it's difficult. All right, I'm accepting life as it is, living life on life's terms. Right, it's finding the quote unquote the no spin zone. Okay, we're not going to spin a story of false power. We're just going to see it for what it is accurately. Okay, next, holism. Okay, so even though it starts with an H, it's kind of like the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, right? Because if you notice, all the false power stories are dealing with a part of reality and excluding another reality, right? So part of it's okay, and then part of it's not okay, right? So when we're holistic, we're looking at the whole picture. We're realizing that everything and everyone is interconnected, and what is in one is in the whole, right? So and all emotions and experiences are allowed. So we have to deal with the full range of human experiences, realizing that we affect each other and taking all those things into account as I make choices related to my power, okay? In a self-esteem, soul-esteem way, we have to realize that we are already enough. We're already okay, we're already worthy, and we don't need to do anything to get to being enough. Right? All the false power stories are like, you have to do X, Y, and Z to be enough, right? I have to be perfect to get enough. I have to give to be enough, whatever it happens to be. I have to squash someone else's weaknesses to be enough. But here, authentic power is telling you on a soul level, you're already enough. You don't have to strive for it, okay? You could still make mistakes and already be enough, okay? You just have to uncover it. All right, so when you realize that, that's soul power. You have to be connected to the core of yourself and the core of your soul, that spirit, that wise mind, and the power emerges from there, okay? So when you're connected with that, you're able to make decisions that are in tune with your intuition, in tune with your wise mind, as they say in DBT, right? And your values, right? So all of those things influence where you have power and how you exercise your power. If you notice, none of the false power stories are following these things, okay? But authentic power always does. Okay, so what are true power stories, right? So we want to convert a false power story to a true power story. So what are the elements here? So these are stories that are clear and accurate about where we have the power to change our life, what the change will actually require in a realistic way, and whether we have the power to actually do that thing and pull it off. Okay, so here are some examples, okay? So for example, I might have the power to lose 10 pounds, okay? However, I can't just positively think it away and say, I'm gonna be thin, and that's gonna be great. It's not magical thinking that's gonna make it happen. So I have the power to lose 10 pounds, but it's gonna take support, maybe Weight Watchers or something like that, changing my diet, so actually doing something different with what I'm eating and being willing to do that, exercising and being willing to do that, and dealing with whatever cravings come up, or maybe my inner food addict or whatever it is that comes up, right? So all these things are going to be part of the process, right? So I'm being realistic about that. And now I have to decide, am I able to accomplish that? Am I willing to accomplish that? And exercise that power, okay? What about overcoming addiction, right? So we dealt with addiction and target behaviors, right? So I have the power to recover from an addiction and target behavior, but I need the willingness to do what it takes to be in recovery. So I can't just wish it away. I can't just want it. I have to actually do it, right? So I have to be willing to go to treatment, maybe get a sponsor, a therapist, and deal with whatever is the dis-ease that is underlying my behavior, right? So the behavior comes from somewhere, and that dis-ease is driving the behavior. So I have to understand what that's about and work that through so that it doesn't just spur a different behavior if I stop the one I'm doing right now, okay? So that's the true power story. Next one, okay, let's look at relationships, okay? So I can learn to set healthy boundaries, but I have to learn why I have such bad boundaries. Why do I have such crappy boundaries? And why I keep inviting, let's say, vampires into my life, or narcissists into my life, or people who don't love me as much as I love them, right? Why do I keep doing this, right? And I have to develop an unconditional self-presence and love to maintain healthy boundaries. That's the soul esteem, okay? I have to believe I'm worth it enough to tell people I don't want to deal with behavior that is demeaning to me or that makes me, feel like I'm less than, right? Why do I keep inviting these people into my life if it's just damaging me, okay? So in all these cases, it's an example of where you might tell yourself, I don't have power here. I can't lose weight. I can't stop my addiction. I can't let these toxic people out of my life. But that's a false power story because there are things you can do, right? So these are examples of things that are actually in your power to do in those situations. So if you're lying to yourself and telling yourself the story that is nothing I can do, then that's a false power story, all right? Okay, so empowering actions, all right? So once we know where we have power, we have to take action, right? So the next step is actually to do something, not just to think it, right? We have to put it out there, okay? So what we could do is we can make a diagram of things in a certain situation where we do have power and where we don't have power to clarify it and put it out there, right? Make it really clear on paper so, you could visualize it. And then figure out what's actually possible today, what's a step I could take right now, and what could I do from that section of the diagram where I do have power, from my power list, let's say. So let's look at this as an example for COVID-19, right? Because we all are going through this in one way or another, okay? So on the outside are a list of things I can't control, and the inside are a list of things I can control, or I do have power over, right? So let's say I have control or power over my attitude, how much news media about COVID-19 I'm consuming, things I can do when I'm quarantined at home if I'm quarantined, how much I protect myself, let's say by wearing masks or social distancing, limiting my social media exposure, so maybe I don't want to see everyone's opinions about it, so I could choose not to look at Facebook, let's say, as much, right? So those are all things that I can work on. So I could say, well, what's one step I could do today? Well, you know what? I'm going to decide that I'm not watching the news today. I'm sick of it. I'm just going to watch some cool show on Netflix and without commercials, and I'm just going to do that. That's maybe going to make me feel a little better. So that's within my power, okay? I can't, control how other people feel about it, whether they're wearing masks or not, whether stores are open or not. I can't control that, but I can control how I'm responding to this situation. And that's where I could find my power. Okay, see how that works? All right. So anyway, I got to give props to Robert Ohotto, who's completely awesome. Definitely check him out. I got a lot of this information from him. He has a series about power and powerlessness on his website, but you have to sign up and get a subscription. But he's a really interesting guy, very intelligent, integrates information in a great way. But I just wanted to give you a little taste of some of the stuff that he talks about. Okay, so that's my power and powerlessness and false power and true power lecture. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed it and it gives you some things to think about. All right, so hope you have a good rest of the day, and I'll see you the next time. All right, bye, guys.